Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. Hello, everybody. This is episode number 330 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. This is the fifth installment in this year's Journey into the Wild Soul. If you're not familiar with the Journey into the Wild Soul, it's a series that I've been running for the last couple of years where we basically explore all these different topics under the umbrella of the Wild Soul Movement body of work, which revolves around embodiment specifically. This year, our theme for the Journey into the Wild Soul has been wholeness. And so our show notes for this episode are at untameyourself.com/330. So untameyourself.com/330. So if you want to find links to all the other shows or wherever you are listening to this podcast, if you're on YouTube and iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to the show, the 4 episodes before this one, we're all exploring other aspects of the journey. You do not have to listen to them in order. It's okay if somehow you are stumbling upon this one and it's the first one you're listening to. You can listen to this one, then you can go back if you want to. And as well, today, if you are listening in real time, is Monday, December 30th. This is the last week of enrollment for my year-long women's circle, Power 2020. I'll say more towards the end of the episode, but let me tell you this. If you haven't checked it out yet, head on over either right now or when you're done listening to the episode to wildsoulmovement.com/power 2020. The reason I have a little more urgency to it today is because enrollment is done on Friday, the 3rd of January. And as well, and I'll share more about this as well later on in the episode, but over the course of this month, the month of December 2019, I am coming to the realization that I might not run Power in 2021, if at all, ever again. And it's super surprising to me. And again, I'll say more about that later. But I know there's always people who say, maybe I'll do it next year, maybe I'll do it next year. And there is a distinct possibility there is not going to be a next year for this. So if you're one of those people, head back on over to the page, feel it out, check in for your yes and for your no. Trust yourself, obviously, but also factor into your consideration if it went away and you never got a chance to do it, would that be cool with you? So Today, we're diving into the second half of the Arc of Power, which is the curriculum that I teach in that year-long women's circle and in my Wild Soul Movement weekend workshops. So there's 4 topics, and last week we dove into the first 2, which are the allowing topics. And the first 2 topics are surrender and release and trust and receptivity. The second 2 topics are passion and purpose and love and truth. Now, this is the first year in 2020 that I'm exploring passion and purpose specifically. For the last 6 years, it has been wild dreaming and desire. But this past year in Power 2020, as we were exploring wild dreaming and desire, and as well this past year as I started working in the Akashic records for myself personally and with tons of clients, I did over 100 readings this year. I realized, all I had to do was listen to discover how many people are really hung up and really stuck and really confused and really desiring to connect with their purpose. People are asking themselves a lot, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? What makes this experience so meaningful? Am I missing anything? And so there's a lot of confusing messaging, narratives, and content out there about the relationship between passion and purpose, and if you should turn your passions into your purpose, and all these things. And I'm really not a fan of anything that always has people, or often has people, it's never always, often has people just putting unnecessary pressure or stress on themselves that, robs them of joy, of creativity, of time, of connection, of freedom, and keeps people in these, harmful cycles, whether it's compulsive consumption, right? Constantly taking programs and courses and reading books and listening to podcasts. And, I say that as a person who creates those things, it's not always. We should be seasoning and cycling in and out of those things, learning and integrating and implementing, and then going back to consume something when we discover what we actually need, not from this place of feeling like we're not enough or we can't do something if we don't know enough. There has to be a healthy mix, right? And that this mix will be different and it will be timed differently for everyone, of learning and implementing and integrating and doing and taking action and being inspired and taking space and allowing things to just simmer and integrate. It looks different for everyone, depending on who you are and how you're built. So this year it felt more urgent, it felt more important, and it felt more appropriate to explore passion and purpose. And wild dreaming and desire will still be in Power 2020, part of, under the umbrella of passion and purpose. But I'm just prioritizing the exploration specifically of passion and purpose over wild dreaming and desire. One of the big things that always comes up during that, though, is the exploration of desires of the ego and desires of the soul. So that's always a big conversation if you are coming to a weekend workshop in 2020, which, by the way, if you want to check those out, you can go to wildsoulmovement.com/workshops. On day 2 of workshops, we always have that conversation. We explore what are the desires of the ego, what are the desires of the soul, how can you tell, how can you prioritize the desires of the soul? So I want to start out talking about passion and purpose by reading you a post that I made on Instagram back on November 19th. And it said, stop killing your passions by trying to turn them all into your purpose. It doesn't always work that way. And people went nuts on this post. It really struck a chord. So here's what I wrote. This one might not land well, seeing as some folks literally make their living convincing people to turn their passions into their purpose. But it needs to be said. Some of you are out there squeezing the joy juice, the stuff that made you passionate about the thing in the first place, right the hell out of it because someone told you that you should make it your life's purpose. Not every purpose is rooted in passion, though. And not every passion succeeds as a purpose. And not every passion or purpose needs to be monetized. Ask me how I know. I turned one of my lifelong passions into my purpose when I became a personal trainer back in 2008, then started an online fitness business in 2011. By 2013, I was over that being my business for a variety of reasons, but there was a devastating side effect I couldn't have anticipated. I tried so many times, but wasn't able to get back into fitness for my own personal passion and joy with any consistency for 6 whole years. Now I know better. So with things I'm super passionate about that bring me joy and fuel my life in ways outside of my career path or soul's purpose, like salsa dancing, for example, I let it live, thrive, and fuel my life and creativity as a passion only. What's cool is when you know how to honor passion and purpose on their own, and when there's an appropriate overlap, your life can begin to flourish and be really generative and self-sustaining. So this will be one of our dedicated topics in this year's Journey into the Wild Soul, since it's totally in line with the theme of wholeness that we're focusing on, and it's a distinction a lot of folks would benefit from learning how to make. So here we are in the Journey into the Wild Soul, exploring this in this episode, in this 5th episode. So one of the things that, passion and purpose, how they function similarly but different, is in terms of alignment, right? You hear people use this term alignment a lot. I like to talk about alignment in terms of really doing the work to discover who you are and how you're built, right? So that involves self-awareness and self-knowledge. And also taking the time and doing whatever practice or exercise you need to do to define your values and your priorities. And I recommend that people do that quarterly, because they'll shift and they'll change, right? One of the things I always say to people too is if you want to know what your values and priorities are, take a look at your bank statements, your credit cards, and your calendar. Where you spend your resources, especially your time and your money, will tell you what you are currently, through your actions and your investments, prioritizing and valuing. And it might not align with what you think or what you say your values and priorities are. So that's a little way of like measuring how in alignment you are, right? So that's a good way to look at, well, I say that I value this, 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 and this. Where am I spending my money? Where am I spending my time? Does it reflect that value? I say that, like, for example, family is a priority. Where am I spending my time? Does that reflect that value? So, for example, one of my values going into this year, I was like, I really want to, one of my priorities rather, I really want to prioritize community, like building local community in Los Angeles. And one of the ways I did that was through my hobby of salsa dancing. And it's cool because almost a year later, it was January where I committed to going dancing 2 or 3 nights a week. Any given week when I'm here in town, and I did it most weeks. And even when I was traveling, I often found at least one salsa night somewhere else, somewhere in the world, wherever I was. And it's totally cool. I have totally plugged into a local community here in Los Angeles now. Every time I go dancing, rather than just me rolling in by myself or just me and my friend Adrian, there's tons of people that I look forward to seeing now, like our salsa family. It's super cool. So I prioritize that, and that reflects one of my values, which is community, which is togetherness and which is joy. So that's just a personal example. So passion and purpose are both invitations for alignment, for joy and meaning, to be useful, to discover and tap into your gifts and your talents, or what soothes or nourishes you, or what might connect you to your people. And, again, this will change over time. There's that saying, some people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I got to tell you, y'all, I entered 2019 with a lot of relationships intact, that I am not leaving 2019 with intact. I entered 2019 without a handful of very important relationships to me didn't even exist yet. Some people I hadn't even met yet. Some of whom you'll get to meet on the podcast in 2020. And now these are some of the closest people in my life. And it's so, I'm sure you can relate to situations like that as well. Not to mention, so people pass in and pass on and pass through our lives in a variety of ways. Some people literally pass away. They leave the earth. And these people leave spaces. They leave gaps. And then we get to fill them when it's appropriate and when it's right. And for some of us, that is part of our purpose. Part of our purpose is to find our people. Some people have a passion or a purpose for building community, for not just participating or finding their people, but to being the one to build and cultivate the community. So for me and my work, that is part of my purpose, to create this global community of wild soul women all over the planet. and to figure out different ways not only you can be involved in like my work and what I offer, but how can you connect to each other? How can you find each other? I think of year in and year out. This year in October, I had 2 women come to the workshop who have been friends via my community for like 3 years, but they were just meeting in real life in person for the first time because one lives in Pennsylvania and one lives in Arkansas. So it was so freaking cool to be like, they have each other because they found each other in Wild Soul Movement. Like, that is part of my purpose, to connect people to their people as well. So a lot of us, let's start with passions. For some people, passions can be creative expression, right? So for me this year, my big passion that I prioritized was salsa dancing. I'm taking that into 2020, going to keep that rolling as well, along with bachata, which I was very, very reluctant to learn for like a decade, and I finally did this year. Last year, in 2018, it was comedy. I started doing stand-up comedy. This year, that just wasn't the thing that I wanted to prioritize. And it doesn't have to be creative, right? Like your passion might be activism. It might be a cause. It might be volunteerism. It might be to just raise conscious, well-adjusted, well-rounded, aware, amazing, kind, caring human beings, your children, right? It could be so many things. It could be reading, knowledge, learning, travel, connecting to your roots, immersing yourself in a skill, cooking, knitting, painting. You don't even have to be good at it, y'all. When something's a passion, you just have to enjoy it and feel energized and alive because of it, right? I was chatting with a friend yesterday. He's a brilliant teacher and practitioner of meditation, embodiment, and some other things related to those topics. And he said this thing, and it's one of my favorite sentences I've ever read. It was instantly, I was just like, wow. I just felt so moved by that. I actually took a good amount of time today to like let it like sink in and like work its way through my system. And I won't share his name because I didn't ask permission, and he's on the other side of the world. So at the time I'm recording this, it's the middle of the night for him and I can't ask. So I'll just share with you what he said. We were talking about meditation, and he said, to me, meditation isn't just a means to an end. It's also a celebration of the end itself. Face to face with life, my lips pressed against the lips of the raw experience of being alive. In other words, a good hobby. And to me, this is passion. A hobby. Some people will like talk down about hobbies, or some people be like, that's escapism. Like anything that brings you joy, anything in excess, of course, can be escapism. But if something is just energizing you, fueling you, bringing you joy, soothing you, calming you, like bringing light into your life, making you feel connected to something and useful and gifted and talented and capable, or challenged in a way that you need or like to be challenged. This shows us why passion and purpose are intricately connected, because I have to believe that the ultimate purpose of life, one of them, is to be fully lived in this way. And for some people, that's through a hobby. And I find this to be so exquisite. So purpose is a whole other thing that for some can be very simple, and for some it's multifaceted and layered. And for some, at different phases and stages of your life, it's simple. For others, it's multifaceted and layered. And of course, there's the purpose we all share, to be the most fully expressed, authentic, loving version of ourselves, right? To be loving and kind and generous and aligned with our soul. And just that alone is the journey of a lifetime, right? Discovering who we are, how we're built, living as that, finding the courage to live as that, because it's constantly shifting and changing over time too, right? So we have to be present and aware, and we have to make time for this. Each of us is a lot to keep up with, y'all. So there's so much more I can say about these two things. There's books and books written about this. Spiritual seekers everywhere travel the world, invest tons of time, energy, money, and attention in figuring out their purpose, and it all exists within. So sometimes guidance is helpful, reflection is helpful. Sometimes it's a passion in a book that reminds you of something that's true about yourself that's been long forgotten or buried. Or maybe it's something you have yet to discover about yourself, and then someone says something and you're like, there's a truth in that for me, and we're going to get to love and truth in a moment. But personally, I love working in the Akashic records for this development and unfolding. Those of you that have done readings with me know how the records work, if you want to learn more about that, you could go to wildsoulmovement.com/Akashic. I didn't do any readings in the month of December, but I will be bringing them back in January. And because I travel a lot for workshops and teacher training from January to October, what I'll do every month in 2020 is on the first of the month, I'll send out an email and I'll post on social media the links, and I'll let people know how many sessions I have available for the month and when they'll be for folks that are interested in those. So I also believe another purpose we all share is to remember that we need each other, that we're all connected, to remember to be kind and caring and generous and develop integrity and live from it, to use our voices and stand up for what we believe in, and to do so without harming ourselves or others. And I love the saying, do no harm, but take no shit. To me, that's the ultimate discernment, right? So passion and purpose, vast, intricate. It'll be an amazing exploration. What I love about the Wild Soul Movement Weekend Workshops is I go through the whole arc of power every weekend workshop, and I'm running 8 in 2020. And it'll be a different conversation every time, depending on who's in the room, right? Because both of these topics, passion and purpose, and how they relate and go together to each other and impact and influence each other and are connected, it depends on who's in the room because they're so vast, right? So one of the things I'm going to start doing, inspired by my friend Michaela Boehm, I love her podcast, by the way, highly recommend it. She talks about all things love, sex, intimacy. She also teaches embodiment. I love, love, love her work. She has a great book called The Wild Woman's Way. And her podcast, she just records Q&A sessions from during her workshops. So, and I'm going to start doing that this year too. So, especially on this topic of passion and purpose, to share, what's coming up depending on the group. Because I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, not everyone can travel to come to a workshop. So one of the things in the podcast to switch it up a little bit and introduce some new flavor and energy into the mix is I'll share some riffs and some recordings from those workshops. Just me, by the way, not anything that anyone who attends shares. One of the most important things to me in all my work is protecting and honoring and creating safe environments for people's privacy. It's one of the reasons why you don't ever see any videos online from my weekend workshops, because those containers they're sealed, they're closed, they're very private and intimate and sacred. So let's get into love and truth. In the intro to this show, I say something about how this is a show that's dedicated to the truth that's always evolving within us and around us. And the great thing about truth is how many of them there are and how much we can learn from the range of truths that exist out there. We can learn from each other's truths. We can edit and refine our own truths, discover or remember new ones. And truth is an interesting thing. I'm not sure that I believe in many absolute truths. And the one thing I do stay away from on the show is universal truths, because honestly, that just doesn't interest me the way that evolving, developing, living, breathing, alive truth does. As well, a universal truth, if it's really universal, is fixed. So we can either accept it or not. But all the other malleable and discoverable truths are where some real gold for our lifetimes live. And I think one of the most loving things any of us can do in our lives is dedicate ourselves to truth. Living it, listening to it, learning from it, acknowledging all the factors that will make some things true for some and not for others. And embodiment is a path to both love and truth. And again, this whole arc of power, surrender, release, trust, receptivity, passion, purpose, love, truth. How do we really touch and embrace and connect with those things in the way that is truest and most useful for ourselves? It's through our bodies. It's through feeling and sensing and naming and discerning and learning. Because in order to fully feel and connect to both or either, you must be open, aware, in your senses, present, willing to feel. And that's scary because a lot of truth is very uncomfortable. And love doesn't entitle you to anything. I've been doing some year-end reflecting and also decade-end reflecting. And one of the most exquisite truths that I embraced/embodied this year is about love. And I practiced big time living in the truth. And let me pause for a second there. When I say living in the truth, I really believe when we bump into truths, like potential or possible truths, that one way to engage with it and interact with it is to try it on. To try it on as true and see how it feels to us. Because then we can discern whether or not it actually is really true for us or not, right? Because again, sometimes things that are true for others are not true for us. So the truth that I tried on this year, and I found to be very true for me, is that sometimes love just isn't enough. I can love something and still have to let it go. And this goes for things, ideas, people, a full range. But for me personally, where I really tried this on was in romantic love. So up until this year, talk about closing out a decade, what defined love, and honestly the last 2 decades, romantic love for me was thinking that if I loved someone, I should be with them. And the problem with that, for someone like me, and some of you can maybe relate to this, maybe some of you can't, is that I love pretty easily. I really, I don't know if it's a gift or an ability or skill, but I see and feel and sense people's magnificence, often the things that they don't even see in themselves. And I think that works a lot of ways, right? It's much easier sometimes for other people to see the absolute amazing beauty and brilliance and genius in others than it is for some people to see it themselves, because they're so attached to all the things that have happened in their life that have convinced them otherwise. But when you meet someone new, they don't have any of that story. They don't have the narratives. They don't have your trauma. They don't know the backgrounds, and they could just see you as you are in your most evolved that you've ever been, right? Because any given moment, we're always the most evolved we've ever been, right? No one really devolves, So, problem for me, I love easily and I have a lot of love to give. So I fall in love with people all the freaking time. I fall in love with strangers sometimes. I can fall in love with the cashier at Whole Foods because I just see something so exquisite about them and I'm just so struck in my heart by it, And again, maybe you can relate to that, maybe you can't. So this year, by trying on that truth that sometimes love just isn't enough, I learned how to commit to a love where the relationship, how to not commit. I write this out so I don't go on too many tangents. I learned how to not commit to a love where the relationship wasn't going to be a good fit for me. Compatibility, y'all, long-term, sustainable compatibility, which sounds much less sexy and romantic than love. But damn, is that much more important than love itself? For me, is what I discovered. So I learned and practiced and was completely softened and tenderized by holding the love in my heart for a few incredible men that I met, but walking away anyway. And then with that love, I let it become longing for what would be good for me someday. So rather than becoming so attaching that love to that man and feeling like if that man wasn't in my life, neither was the love, I kept the love but left the men. I kept the love and I held that as an experience that someone else will live into, and it will apply with someone more compatible, better suited for me in some way at whatever point when that arrives. And as well, and this is a tantric perspective that some of you might vibe with, some of you might not, because it does put things in a binary. So ditch it if it doesn't resonate for you, but I'm going to share for those of you who it might. My friend Alia, who was on the podcast earlier this year, we'll link up to her episode in the show notes here at untameyourself.com/330. Alia helped me try this on and see how it felt. And I have to tell you, it made everything feel better and more worthwhile, regardless of outcome. And basically, here was the practice: to see every man as an expression of the divine masculine wanting to love me through them. And I'm talking like every man. I'm talking about like the guy at Home Depot that helped me figure out where to get my keys cut, to the guy I went on a date with, or, the lover that circled back into my life this fall who I met in the spring and thought I would never see him again. And to remember that if every man is an expression of the divine masculine, and that I am an expression of the divine feminine, wanting to love on them, right? So the divine feminine wanting to work through me to love on this man in that moment in whatever way was inspired, and the divine masculine working through these men to love on me in whatever way in that moment was inspired. Harmonizing that flow between those two divine principles. This is like that anthropos, right? That expression, that embodiment, fully human and fully divine. And listen, ultimately, the divine masculine and the divine feminine are one and the same anyway. And within and around and creating and living through all of us anyway. But this perspective, this frame, helped me, again, to release attachment and pain around specific people, and to let my desires and longing remain, but to be available to be inspired and met and fed and seen and supported in so many more ways than just pining away for this supposed one who might somehow magically be able to figure it all out, which is a pretty unreasonable expectation or task to hold someone to. So that was a beautiful exploration of both love and truth for me this year. So there's also the expression of love that is fierce. I love fierce love. I've written posts about this and talked about this on the show before as well. Fierce love holds people accountable. Fierce love says uncomfortable things. Fierce love preserves and protects people's dignity and humanity, but doesn't lie. Fierce love isn't always nice, but it's kind. And it knows how to be nice when it's an expression of self-love, honoring, discernment, and protection. It's the kind of love that is oriented towards justice, mercy, and forgiveness, but doesn't rush any of those things inappropriately or bypass to get to them. Fierce love isn't afraid to do the deep work of repair, despite the shame that inevitably arises in that work. It's the kind of love that actually dissolves shame and fuels and fosters connection and intimacy on so many levels, in so many contexts. It's brilliant. And I think I've already used the word exquisite here, but that's what it is. It's stunning. It's a stranger smiling, holding a door, giving a genuine compliment. It's a thank you. An acknowledgement and appreciation for the thing that usually goes unseen, that makes us feel like we matter. It's what makes us want to be better people for ourselves and the future and each other, and so we don't repeat the hurt and harm and trauma of the past. It's why we can do hard things, and essentially it's everything. Going back to purpose, it's what we came here for. So as I was writing out the points that I wanted to share in this episode, which, we could write books about these 4 things: passion, purpose, love, truth. So distilling it into an episode that's going to end up being, we're around 30 minutes now. It'll probably end up being maybe 40 minutes max. This one will be a little bit shorter. There's a bajillion angles and directions and things we could have explored in here. But I was scrolling through Instagram, not looking for inspiration. Straight up, I was just procrastinating. And of course, divine timing, hashtag synchronicity. I come across this post by Cleo Wade, who, sidebar, I would love to have on the podcast in 2020. She's on my list. And here's what she wrote. She wrote, and again, this is by Cleo Wade, I have experienced just about every type of heartbreak that exists. The kind that happens with a romantic partner, with someone I wished were a romantic partner, with a family member, a friend, even a stranger. I've known the heartbreak associated with professional situations and things I aspire to, a dream that never came true or a dream that did come true, but when it did, it wasn't meant to be. I've even broken my own heart a few times, and then in parentheses it says, more than a few, actually. What I've learned from having my heart in pieces is that our stories are important. They help us take our pieces and build something new. And if we build with love, they can help us build something better than we had before. When we get real and honest and raw about what we go through, we have the power to turn our words into medicine and our experiences into wisdom. I need to reread that last sentence again because I love it so much. And this is a big truth. When we get real and honest and raw about what we go through, we have the power to turn our words into medicine and our experiences into wisdom. And saying big truth just there reminded me, this is why the driving question of this podcast for the last 2 years and for the third year, counting now, will be and has been, what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now? So literally, when we talk about how many truths exist out there, every single time I have a podcast guest, they are sharing a truth or a couple of truths, right? You all are resonating. Maybe that's true for you. Maybe it's not true for you. Like there's just, how can we be bored when there's this much to explore, everybody? And then the other week in the Power 2019 group, I shared love truth, a truth about love. There is an inherently wise, knowing, and divine part of you, your wild soul is what I call it, that loves you so much because love is its truth. No matter what's going on in your life, what your mind is saying about you, or any other thing that might appear like unlove, your wild soul loves you. We all come in with this inherent love, loving energy, knowing energy, and loving voice inside of us. And so everything I do, all the embodiment work, power, my weekend workshops, teacher training, any other workshops I run, every friggin' thing I run on Instagram, all these damn podcast episodes are about reminding you always to be listening for that voice and to let that voice be louder. I've also come to learn that love and truth live in the heart. The more we cultivate deep connection and listening with our hearts, the more love and truth we will be able to see, hear, hold, embrace, embody, access, and share, which loops us back to purpose because, hello, I'm pretty sure this is what we're all here in Earth School. I recently interviewed my friend, Vanessa Codornio, and this is what she kept saying. We're all here in Earth School. And I loved that, right? So I'm pretty sure this is one of the things we're all here in Earth School to learn, right? So I said earlier I would speak a moment more to Power 2020. This episode is airing on December 30th, 2019. Registration for Power officially closes this Friday, which will be January 3rd, 2020. And I mentioned it in an email a few weeks ago. And I mentioned it earlier. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be running Power in 2021 or even ever again after this year. And I didn't see that coming because I feel extremely excited and ready for Power 2020. I don't want to run enrollment in the month of December ever again. And so I got to figure out the timing. There's just like a couple little factors that I need to rework, which might be reworkable and might not. So that's to be determined. And that's why Power may or may not come back in any future year. I love running Power. The curriculum is so good. And the healing and transformations women have in there are something else. So if I do end up retiring it for good, it's a much bigger decision than I could make in just a month. I'll probably be feeling it out for most of 2020, to be honest. So all this kind of caught me off guard because I have been enrolling for something in the month of December, year in and year out for like the last 5 years. So that's just a reminder. Check out Power 2020. If you need to apply for the Gather Up pricing, apply for that. It's there for a reason. My last pop-up bonus is happening on New Year's Day, January 1st. I'm giving you one more chance to grab a free spot in a weekend workshop in 2020. So when you enroll specifically on January 1st, and that I live in the Pacific time zone in Los Angeles, so we will go by Pacific time for that. When you sign up on New Year's Day, you get a free spot in a weekend workshop. And here's the cool thing. A lot of people have been asking me this. The answer is yes. If you can't attend, can you send someone in your place? You can. So get that weekend workshop, y'all. It's a $399 value. So you get that for free when you join on January 1st. So if you've been on the fence, but decide you're in and would want to attend a workshop for free, again, you can send someone in your place if you can't go for whatever reason. Power details are at wildsoulmovement.com/power 2020. And that's it. That's it, everyone. This episode is going to be a little bit shorter. I was going to include another 2 recordings of some alumni interviews I did, and then I couldn't find the files. It's been that kind of week up in here. So if I find them, I'll post them in the Journey into the Wild Soul Facebook group for you, so you can check those out. But on the Power 2020 page, there's some alumni interviews from last year. I mean, there's a million testimonials on the page. Here's the deal. Like, at this point, enrollment has been open since Black Friday weekend, since November. You've listened to these podcast episodes. You've read my social media posts, my emails. Some of you are in the Facebook group for the Journey into the Wild Soul. Take another couple moments to feel into it. But, if you want to do it, And if you don't want to do it, you don't need to belabor this decision. And remember, there's no FOMO with this, right? I really only want people in power who really want to be there. So, check yourself for fear and resistance if that's what it is. But if it's a no, it's a no. I don't take that stuff personally. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's not for you. I understand that things I create are not for everyone. However, if you're feeling it, come on in, y'all. It's going to be amazing. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Share this up. Talk to your friends about it. If you want to share your reflections with me, email me at hello@wildsoulmovement.com if you're a private person, or you can also DM me on Instagram. And then if you're into the Journey into the Wild Soul Facebook group, just pop in there. We'll be posting, sharing, talking about it. Let me know what you thought. See you later. Okay, so let's talk about trust for a minute. I talk about self-trust a lot. And in Power, we primarily focus on self-trust, but if you're working on self-trust, you're going to have to be also looking at how interactions with other people impact the way that you trust yourself and also the way that you trust life. Like, it is a fundamental belief to trust that life in some way, shape, or form is always working on your behalf.